letting folks into the room. This is the awkward part of these webinars where we're waiting for people to log in, but it's good to be here with you. I'm Rob Booth, and I want to invite everybody to practice interacting with us because these calls are always the best when there's a bit of conversation back and forth between us, the presenters, and also the audience. So you can communicate with us via the chat box. We can't see or hear you, but go ahead and just drop in the chat box where you're calling from. And if you're running for office already, what office are you running for? And I'm just going to go ahead and say hi for Maine. And the other thing is we love weaving questions into these presentations as we're giving them. And there is a Q&A button at the base of the screen. And you should be able to ask questions with that Q&A button. And if you do that there instead of the chat, it just makes sure that we're not going to lose it in the flow of conversation. The chat sort of is this endless stream, whereas the Q&A button will add it to a list of questions that we can check off as we go. So if you have questions, even at the onset here, feel free to submit them. And as a reminder, this is Win Your Race messaging that moves voters. So we're going to
Looks like we lost our host here for a second.
connect with voters. Oh, hello.
Welcome back, Rob.
You're here, Rob.
I am here. Yay. So I was just saying that today's session is all about messaging and connecting that personal why statement that we worked on a few weeks ago to a public narrative that connects with voters. And we have a really good session lined up. Our expert is returning Derek Lane from our goodparty.org staff. Many of you have probably worked with Derek directly. But we're going to talk about how to define your core message, how to create sharp contrast with your opponents, and how to translate your personal motivation into voter-focused solutions. So if you have questions about that, use that Q&A button to start submitting those. And then after that, we're going to dig into strategies for tailoring your message, depending on who you're talking to, whether it's your base voters or your persuadable voters. We'll define what those different audiences are. And of course, Derek is also going to talk a little bit about how you can use goodparty.org's tools to help you refine your messaging and your targeting to make sure that you're having the highest impact possible when you're taking this polished message out to the field. So without further ado, I'll let Derek introduce himself, but I will put a little shine on him in saying that he has deep experience working with candidates on all of these questions, both here at goodparty.org, as well as earlier in his career and on issue campaigns like Derek and I met working on marriage equality work, where we did a lot of messaging work around persuasion and actively finding things that move people from one point to another point on an issue. So a depth of experience to draw from, but Derek, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And for those of you who didn't know, as you can imagine, marriage equality work, Rob and I had significantly less gray hairs than we do now, 15 years into our campaign journeys here. But thank you so much, guys. I'm Derek. I'm the Senior Campaign Success Manager here at goodparty.org. It's my job to work with candidates and make sure they have the tools and skills they need to run and win their election. So very, very happy to be here. Very happy to be talking with you guys about messaging and how to craft a campaign platform and a campaign message that will resonate with voters and help you win your election. So before we start, before you can persuade voters, before you can mobilize a single supporter, before you can even begin to start your outreach, you need clarity on your message. And not just, any message, but a message that actually connects your vision and your values to your community. So we're going to start where we always start. If you guys were here for my last training, we talked about this fairly extensively. But we're going to start with the most important question of your entire campaign, which is, why are you running? And I want you guys to think about this a little bit differently than what you might be used to. This is not your platform. Your why statement is not your platform. It is not about listing out your policy positions on every single issue you can think of. It's not even what you plan to do once you're in office, right? Your why should be connected to your values and your motivation. Like what pushed you into wanting to step forward and take that leap into running for office in the first place. And when a voter hears your why for the first time, when they come in contact with you for the first time, they are not analyzing your policy details. I think we would all like to think that they are only going to vote on their own self-interest, but what's happening in these first interactions is they're making a judgment about who you are. They're asking themselves, what does this person care about? What kind of leadership are they going to bring to my community? And does this person understand people like me? And this is where specifically I see a lot of candidates sort of unintentionally missing their mark, especially in the early stages. They have a very strong, maybe a personal story, but they keep it centered on themselves. They want to talk about their accomplishments. They want to talk about all of the change they're going to bring to the community. But a strong message really takes this idea, takes this vision, and takes all your values, and it connects your story to the voter, right? It answers the most fundamental question in politics. Why should this matter to me, right? And so what you're aiming for in these why statements and sort of explaining what your motivation, what you're aiming for is alignment, right? Your motivations should connect to something your community is experiencing right now, something real. If you've been to any of my trainings, you've heard me talk about your personal background, your potholes, and your prescriptions, right? What are the real problems that you can point to, the real things that people are going to recognize in their day-to-day lives? And when your story can reflect that shared problem that your community is facing, your message becomes infinitely more powerful. So one example I like to use, and this comes up a lot for city council races or some county level races, but let's say a big piece of your campaign platform is about improving infrastructure, right? You might say something like, "I've always cared about improving infrastructure," and that tells a voter absolutely nothing, right? And so what you might say instead is, we've been underserved. Our roads and bridges have been crumbling here in our community over the last 15 years, and it's become clear we need someone to step up and deliver real results. And so what you're doing here is you're naming a real problem, and you are positioning yourself as someone who is responding to that need from the community, right? So just I want you guys to all think just sort of as a quick gut check about how you're thinking about your own campaign, but is your why statement about you? And I want you guys to be as honest as you can with yourselves. Is your why statement about you, or does it connect clearly to what your community is dealing with right now?
Yeah, that's a really important reframe, Derek, that, is this about you or is it about your community? And I dropped this in the chat and I invite everyone who's listening in, feel free to share what pushed you to step forward to run for office in the first place, because we'd love to hear it. And it is really at the core, as Derek has laid out, of this work. So it's good to have that top of mind. And as Derek pointed out, the instinct is always to talk about yourself when you're running for office. But the most compelling version of your story is actually about the community, right? So, Derek, once a candidate has that as their foundation, what is next in terms of structuring their message?
Yeah, that's a good question. And there's sort of a little activity I typically do on the outset of the campaign. But the next step is making sure your message is something that you can use consistently amongst various audiences at different times. So messaging really only works if you can say it clearly and repeat it over and over and over and over again. There's a phrase I've used. I used to run paid canvases for a long time. And when you're dealing with door-to-door canvassing with like voter persuasion as the primary goal, what you do is a phrase I used to come up with that was called get them to verbalize and internalize, right? Getting a voter to repeat your message back to you so they internalize your message. But you should be able to say your message clearly over and over and over and over and over again. And this is where a really helpful tool comes in, something that's called a message box. So if you can imagine, we've got four little boxes up here on screen. Okay. Uh, what a message box will help you do help you sort of think about the full conversation that's happening in your race, not just what you want to say. And there are four parts to it. There is what you are saying about yourself and what you're saying about your opponent or the status quo or the system as it is, and what your opponent's going to say about themselves and what your opponent is going to say about you. And all four of these narratives are happening at the same time throughout the campaign, whether you plan for them or not. You are not the only person in the race that's defining your campaign. Your opponent is defining themselves, and they're also trying to define you. And your job as a candidate and as a messenger for your values and your vision is to get ahead of that and define yourself and the race on your own terms. And that means being very, very intentional with how you describe yourself, how you describe the problems in your community, and how you describe the choice that voters are making, right? As you're building that out, there are a few things I think that you should strive to make sure are absolutely clear. But like, what are the main challenges you're stepping in to address? What are the values that guide you and how you lead? What direction are you offering that's different in terms of solutions? And what actually sets you apart from your opponent? Because contrast is a very, very important part of messaging, and I think it is the area where I see candidates get the most uncomfortable. And there tends to be sort of extremes at both ends where folks don't want to draw a contrast against their opponents at all. They only want to talk about themselves and what they're bringing to the race. And then there are folks who go on the extreme other end who they go straight to negative. They're not talking about campaign stuff. They're attacking the character of their opponent, or they are talking about things that are irrelevant to the race. So I think it's important for candidates to understand that drawing a contrast is not negative campaigning. It is about being clear. Okay. If a voter hears you and hears your opponent and cannot tell the difference, they do not have a reason to vote for you. Okay. If you are the same as your opponent, if you sound the same as your opponent, and you are not drawing contrast, they do not have a reason to vote for you. And I think that's very important to understand at a fundamental level. And once you've thought through your why and you've started to define your message and your contrast, the next step is really turning that into what you can actually say out loud. Things that you can use anywhere at events, in conversations, in interviews on TV and radio, or even in just sort of quick little interactions at elevator pitches, as they're typically called. And this elevator pitch, this 1 to 2 minute distillation of your message, this strong version should, again, be able to convey who you are, why you're running, what problem you're stepping in to solve, and what type of leadership you're offering. It stays very focused. It should not be your full story. It should not be every issue you care about, but it should be a clear, repeatable explanation of your campaign. And as you're thinking about this and sort of trying to pull all of these sort of disparate messaging thoughts together, the question I want you guys to keep in mind is what is the essential essence of your campaign, the thing you could capture in a short, clear phrase or a slogan, right? You cannot say it simply. It is not going to be easy for voters to remember. So if at all possible, you should walk away from a conversation with a voter and they should be able to verbalize and therefore internalize the core crux of your campaign messaging.
Excellent. Yeah, that 1 to 2 minute version of this is a workhorse for the entire campaign because it's the message that you can return to over and over again. And once you have that locked in, it can feed all the different types of messaging that you have. I even like, I love the way that you said it, where there's the slogan version of this as well. I sometimes joke about that as being the bumper sticker version. Like, if you are passing someone on the street, what is the 30-second version? And if they actually stop and talk to you, what's the 2 minute version that you expand on out of that? And if this person is, beyond just stopping, says, I want to hear more about this, what's the version that would be on the pamphlet that you hand them before they walk away is another way of thinking about this. But Derek, yeah, tell me more about how once you define that initial short version, how it can feed into different messages that a candidate might use throughout the race. And I'll call attention because I saw a question in the chat here asking for examples. I did go ahead and share a link to a template that I hope that you all use that helps you to write this first initial short message. So Derek went over most of the fundamentals that are in that template, but that template has some specific examples of these why statements in action that you can look at. But Derek, go ahead, walk us through the different types of messaging.
Yeah, so it is very important to understand that your primary goal will be different at various parts of the campaign and depending on who you're talking about, right? At any given point, you're doing some combination of introducing yourself, of persuading voters, or asking people to take action, right? Whether that be give to the campaign, get involved, or most importantly, go vote. So the difference really is which one of these specific areas you're emphasizing when you're talking to folks, who you're talking to, and what you're asking them. So I think it helps to sort of think about your messaging in three fairly broad categories. The first is awareness. This is at the beginning of the campaign. It's where you're introducing yourself. You're making sure people know, hey, there is an election, and hey, I am in it, and then there's a reason that I'm running for office. This kind of messaging is typically about exposure and building name recognition. You're really sort of helping voters understand who you are and what you're about, right? You're also starting to learn from the candidate side who's paying attention and who might be part of your likely voter universe. We're not going to be talking about audiences or universes today, but the asks here typically in the awareness message are fairly low lift, right? It's learn more, follow me, sign up, check out my social media. Really, awareness messaging is about sort of opening the door and giving folks just a really easy way to stay connected with your campaign. So at the same time, you're doing your awareness. You're also going to be doing persuasion. This is where you're helping voters understand why they should choose you as the candidate, right? This is where you're defining the race on your terms and making clear what sets you apart from your opponents. And this is where contrast messaging is typically found in the persuasion message package. You're not just saying sort of who you are, but you're helping them understand the difference between you and the other options on the ballot or the sort of current dynamic in your community. This is also where we're going to start introducing stakes, right? You're going to tell them why this election matters, why this election is important, what happens if absolutely nothing changes, and what is possible if you win your race. And the asks here tend to start involving some sorts of commitments, volunteer, donate, attend event. These are ways really for people to move from like passive interest into active support. And last is activation, right? This is where you are turning your support into action. Typically, activation messaging is going to be happening with folks who are already supportive, right? These are folks who already believe in you and want to do something specific to help move the campaign forward. This is mostly about clarity and urgency. You are telling people exactly what needs to happen, how they can do it, right? This might be contacting voters if you're recruiting volunteers, hosting events if you're having house parties. But the message here is very direct and action oriented. And all three of these things are going to be happening at the same time throughout your campaign. So early on, you're going to be doing a lot more awareness as you get closer to the election. Activation becomes the primary focus, but none of them really ever fully go away. The key is making sure that your message matches what you need from that specific audience in that moment. Okay. If someone is hearing about you for the very first time, they need awareness. If someone is deciding between you and another candidate, they're going to need persuasion, right? If someone already supports you, you need to provide them with a clear action they can take to help move the campaign. And I think the last piece here, we're going to touch on this a lot more in a later section, but uh, the last piece here is refining your pitch. Okay, most candidates start with a draft that is a little long. If anyone's ever tried to write a 2-minute campaign speech, you realize how quickly it turns into a 5-minute campaign speech. All right, they tend to be a little unfocused. And in some cases, they're a little too internal, a little too inside baseball. Um, and the goal is to keep shaping that message through your trusted partners and your supporters and the folks that are out there with their ear to the ground. Keep shaping it so it becomes more persuasive, more straightforward, and more relatable to the voters that you're going to be speaking to. This usually means tightening that language, cutting anything that doesn't actually add value or add any information to what you're saying, and making sure that it sounds like something that you would actually say in a real conversation. So, if your message is very easy and easy to repeat, like I said, is going to be much more likely to stick in the minds of voters and be on the forefront of their mind when they finally walk into the ballot booth in November or on election day, whenever your election is.
I love the way that you've broken this down, Derek. You know, the three phases, again, just to reiterate for folks who are hearing this for the first time, being awareness, persuasion, and activation, right? Those are the three different types of messaging. And it's easy for candidates to kind of make a mistake and default just into one mode and forget about the others entirely. So let's dig into that last piece that you mentioned just a little bit more, you know, who you're talking to, because tailoring a message to the right audience is its own skill set, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it is, like I said, I mean, it is very important that you are shaping your message based on what your goals are and who you're talking to. And often they're very connected, right? The audience might inform the call to action. And there's sort of two groups of voters and that I sort of like to break campaigns up into, right? You're going to have your base supporters, right? These folks are already inclined to agree with you. They're going to be sharing your values, and they're more likely to be engaged with your campaign. And ultimately, those are the folks who are going to end up volunteering and donating and helping spread your message. When you're speaking to your base, your message should pretty much always be reinforcing those shared values and give your supporters a sense of both energy and purpose, right? You want them to feel like they are part of something, that they are part of the vision that you are sharing for your community. You want them to sort of tap into the urgency and momentum of the campaign so that they are motivated to take action. This is where you sort of like lean into what you stand for, why it matters, and you make clear that their involvement is part of achieving that. The other sort of bucket of voters is persuadable voters, right? These are people who have not firmly decided. They probably aren't following the race closely. They probably don't see themselves as strongly aligned with any particular candidate, right? And when you're speaking with persuadable voters, your message should be grounded in impact and everyday concerns, right? You want the focus to be on practical outcomes and clear solutions and issues that affect their daily lives. And this audience tends to the message is less about sort of rallying that support and getting them excited, and more about building that initial trust that is going to take to get them to hear your rallying message, right? You are showing them that you understand their concerns and that you have a reasonable, credible approach to addressing them. And one thing to keep in mind here that I think is very important, but if you are, this is especially true, I think, if you are in a group setting or you have an opportunity to be face to face with some of these voters. Uh, but some of the best messaging you can ask to persuadable voters is quite simply, why do you feel that way? And you guys will find that voters will tell on themselves, and they will tell you exactly what issues are most important to them in their race, and you're going to be able to speak to those values and connect them directly to your campaign. But the thing to keep in mind is that tailoring your message does not mean changing who you are or what you believe in to fit in to who you're talking with, right? You should not, will not, are not running two different campaigns, okay? You can emphasize different parts of the same message depending on who you're talking to. But if your message starts to feel completely different from one audience to another, that's usually a sign that something is off, that you should be seeking feedback from your trusted advisors, and that you should um, you know, start looking at that message and start looking to refine it even more. And the last piece here, very important, I just touched on it briefly about trusted advisors, but your messaging should not be happening in a vacuum, right? You're not guessing in a vacuum. Early on, you're going to have some assumptions about who your voters are and what they care about. And some of those assumptions are going to be dead to rights, right? And some are going to be so far off, you're going to wonder how you ever thought that that was a prevailing sentiment in your community. And this is where your kitchen cabinet, your sort of earliest group of supporters, and your sort of broader community come into this process for you. Uh, you should have somebody, especially if you're giving a speech, and I very strongly recommend this, and you have a supporter in the room who's close to you and is someone who can give you honest feedback that you will take in a friendly manner. Uh, but if you're giving a speech, they should be on the lookout to see how people are responding to the messages you're giving out. Okay, what is resonating? What's falling flat? What questions keep coming up over the course of the campaign? And this type of feedback is incredibly, incredibly valuable. It really helps you refine not just your message, but your own understanding of who you're actually trying to reach. And the more you listen early on, the more you ask, why do you feel that way? Why is this the most important issue? What about this excites you? What about this makes you angry? The more you listen early on, the sharper your messaging is going to become over time, and the more effective it's going to be at moving the needle and moving somebody from being, neutral or undecided and pushing them into your camp and tipping them over that edge so they cast their vote for you.
Yeah, I just want to call out. I've been watching all the chat in the chat tonight, and it's really great. One of the things I love about this community is just how supportive it is, and seeing the way that you guys are all encouraging each other in the chat is really making me smile as we move through this. I also want to invite any questions that folks might have at this time as well. But Derek, the point that you made about the kitchen cabinet is so underrated, right? Like, people think messaging is something that you have to figure out alone or try live with voters. But your earliest conversations that you're having with your friends, with your family, that actually is oftentimes as strong as any research that you end up doing in the field itself, and oftentimes is a good starting place. So, okay, once you've got your message dialed in for your different audiences, what are some of the ways that goodparty.org's tools can help candidates to actually execute on those messages and put those best messages directly into the hands, or in some cases, the phones or the door steps of the voters who need to hear these messages?
Yeah, the first thing I would point you guys to is our AI message refinement tool. You can take a rough draft of your core message and run it through the AI to get to fairly quickly get a much sharper and more relatable version. And generating like supporting content like a content calendar or talking points or scripts for your volunteers to use. All of that can be done with the AI message refinement tool. And we also have, voter audience targeting. And this is where sort of the math behind your messaging lives. You can use that voter data to understand exactly who needs to hear which version of your message so that you're not, blasting the same pitch at your base as you are the persuadable voters. And there's also script generators, right? Whether you're canvassing or texting or doing fundraising outreach, you can generate those scripts directly from your core message. And you can do that right on the goodparty.org platform. Um, but I will say, and this I think is very, very, very important. These tools are most powerful when the strategic foundation is already there, right? If you've done the work on your why and you've done your message box and you've figured out your contrast, then using that AI to generate variations of those and generate scripts of them, it acts as a multiplier. But if you have not done that foundational work yet, I generally believe that output won't be nearly as useful. And so, what I recommend for every single person who is in this and is in this position in their campaign where they're trying to nail down their messaging is do the thinking first. Okay, do the thinking on your own, and then let the tools help you execute the outcomes from that faster, if that makes sense. But the messaging at its heart is a reflective exercise. And if you can take the time to reflect on what you're going to say about yourself and your opponent, what your opponent's going to say about you, and what you're going to say about them, right? That you are going to be in a much better position to use these tools to their absolute fullest capacity and produce some messaging framework that is effective to your campaign and true to who you are as a person and a candidate.
Yeah, I think some of those tools on the front end are so incredibly useful. In particular, the template that just spits out a message box for you. I know we talked about that exercise at the beginning of this training, and that to me is one of the most important things I've done with every single candidate I've ever worked with. I've done it on issue-based campaigns to get ready for the messaging that I think is most effective and also pushing back. I think it's one of the best debate prep tools, let alone a general messaging tool. And so if you're interested in walking through that exercise, logging into your goodparty.org dashboard, this is one of the free tools that I think is most effective, especially if you're in the earlier phases of building out your campaign and you want to do that foundational work that Derek is talking about. So the last big piece of messaging is something that I think a lot of candidates don't think about enough. And that is how to get your whole team rowing in the same direction or singing from the same hymnal, so to speak. So when it comes to message discipline and, oftentimes getting the folks who aren't just the candidate operating from a place of message discipline, how do you do that, Derek? What are the best ways to train your people to be strong messengers on the behalf of your campaign, whether that's knocking doors or acting as a representative for you in rooms that you can't be in yourself?
Yeah, that starts quite simply with creating a strong feedback loop. You want to create an environment in your campaign among your supporters and among your advisors where people feel comfortable telling you how your message is actually landing, right? Feedback is a gift. It is a gift, okay? So these folks should be not just telling you what sounds good in theory, but what are people responding to in these real interactions. And your volunteers, your early supporters, your kitchen cabinet, these are the people that are out there talking to voters. These are the people who, at the very least, are going to be hearing how people react when your campaign comes up. Believe it or not, guys, when you talk to voters as a candidate, they might give you a little bit of a biased answer because you're there looking them in the eyes, right? And so information you can get about your campaign from your supporters when that voter doesn't have to look right at you and tell you yes or no, exceptionally valuable to the long-term health of your campaign. So you want to be asking those supporters questions like, what are you hearing? What seems to resonate? What are people pushing back on? Right? What feels confusing? And that kind of honest feedback is one of the most valuable tools you have in your toolbox for refining that message. And at the same time, as Rob sort of talked about it, call it consistency, call it discipline. But as your message evolves, the core of it should stay steady, right? Your team should not be giving five different versions of why you're running or what you stand for, right? If somebody asks a volunteer, a staff member, a close supporter why this campaign, why your campaign matters, the answers should be aligned. That doesn't mean everybody's going to sound identical or give the same verbatim talking points, but it does mean that they are telling the same story, right? And this becomes especially important when you are dealing with comparisons, right? Contrast from your opponent or challenges come up over the course of the campaign. If somebody asks you how you're different from another candidate or raises a criticism, your team should have a clear, shared way of responding. Otherwise, you'll end up with mixed signals, and that dilutes your message, that weakens your message, that makes it uh, resonate less and land softer with voters. So, part of your job as a candidate is making sure your team understands not just like what to say, but how to say it in a way that it reflects the campaign and reflects your vision. So, uh, and this is not a one-way process, right? Your team should also be part of refining your message and helping you actually write some of that copy. Because again, they are seeing things that you are not. They are hearing different perspectives that you are not. And they're picking up on nuances in how your community is responding to your message. So involve them in that process. Ask them what feels true to this community. Ask them about what language people are using, right? Ask them what feels off or out of touch, right? Especially when you're coming to your message box, where am I vulnerable? What is my opponent gonna say about me? This is, I think, a very hard reflection for candidates to have on themselves. Uh, but find a trusted friend, that one who has no problem telling you when you're sort of out of pocket, and work with that person closely in your messaging to make sure that your campaign and your messaging reflects the reality of the people that you are trying to represent. When your team is aligned and is actively contributing to that process, and they have that buy-in, your message will become stronger. It'll be consistent, and it's going to be grounded in the needs of your community. And that is what ultimately is going to make it the most effective message you can possibly have for your campaign. But it's
Excellent.
learning. Your campaign is a learning machine. We use that phrase over here at goodparty.org a lot, building learning machines, but that is what your campaign is. You should be learning from your community what matters to them, and you should be tailoring your message and connecting your values and your vision to the concerns that you are hearing in the streets, in the rooms, where you have an opportunity to talk to voters. But it's a very intentional process, and it's a very reflective process, and it is a process that should be happening continuously throughout the course of the campaign.
Yeah, I think listening is a underrated skill set, especially in politics. Folks oftentimes get into this and are so excited to share their ideas on what they can fix and what the biggest problems are, that they don't enter into a meaningful dialogue with their community first. I think the strongest campaigns are the ones that start from a place of dialogue, and then use that to inform their why. Again, this is like separating you from the community in that why statement. So we've reached the part of the night where we shift just into answering questions from the audience. And I have two of them that I see here. First, I want to go to Shalaya, who says, how does one distance oneself from a personality contest instead of an election? So how do you center it around, the actual who's best for the job instead of just being a personality contest, Derek?
Yeah, yeah, Shalia, good to see you again. Haven't seen your name pop up. It's always nice to see you in here. But the simple answer is always going to be, how do I connect my campaign and what I want to do to the values in my community, right? You are trying to solve problems, Shalia, right? There is an issue you've addressed in your community that you want to see dealt with. Chances are the individual personality traits of the people currently in office aren't necessarily the problem, right? It's lack of vision. It's a different set of values. It's a different partisan makeup. But at the end of the day, if you're telling people, I recognize this issue, here is how I would step up to the plate to address this, and here's how that connects to the vision. Here's what our community could look like if you voted for me, right? So if you are someone who is worried about parks, right, and there are no public parks in your town, you can sort of make that contrast of, look, we've had leadership here in this community that's been in place for 15 years, and we haven't been able to get things done. I envision Paris, Maine, as one of the largest, outdoor recreation centers in the state. It is my goal to, if I get elected to city council, to help that, right? None of that talks about the personality, right? And it shouldn't be about your personality. It shouldn't be about your opponent's personality. The best way to have the election be about the election and not like a cult of personality for anybody, is define yourself, define your values, and share those values with people. And those values are going to be what resonates. Because at the end of the day, again, as much as we would like to think voters are self-interested and are always going to vote exactly the way that benefits them, voters are not rational, right? They are going to vote based on how you make them feel. And if you are connecting the values that they care about with your campaign, that is the way that you avoid all of the personality contest nonsense, horse race nonsense that comes with campaigns.
Yeah. Another question was asking to go a little bit deeper about how you can use data and targeting to make sure that your message is connecting to the right voter. And I did share a past Good Party Academy live that we did on this topic. So if you want the 90-minute answer, that link is there for you. But Derek, what can you say about different ways that you might use data once you have the messages to connect it to the right audience, and maybe even talk a little bit about how the data looks different for your base supporters, your persuasion supporters, and your activation supporters?
Yeah, so it's very campaign dependent. So I'm going to try to do this in broad strokes, but data is the lifeblood of your campaign, right? I think about how they were campaigning 40 years ago. I'm into campaigning. I read books about it and stuff, guys. I nerd out about this. And to think how little data they were operating with back then compared to the vast amount of data that exists on voters today. And so one of the things that you might do early on in the campaign is build out what I'm going to call like voter profiles. Like, what does a Derek Lane supporter look like, right? They're probably on the center left, right? They're probably, they care a lot about environmental issues, right? I'm going to find people who are modeled to have similar values to I am, right? That's how I'm going to find my base supporter. I'm going to use that data to start ABC testing messages on what's working, what's moving the needle, what folks are responding to. I like to, especially when I'm doing like large door-to-door programs, sort of like set up these 2-week windows where we're testing messages like in a very, very strong feedback loop. But a lot of it's going to be Uh, get out there, talk to people so that you can build the sort of foundation of data you need to figure out what do my persuadable voters look like? What are the demographics that make them up? What are some of the modeled characteristics and behaviors of these voters? And you can do that sort of across the different buckets of voters. Yeah, there's a lot. I don't want for this to slip into the 90-minute version of this answer, Rob, and so I'll wrap it up there. But the fact is, you can do a lot with the data. But the biggest piece, I think, is using that data to build yourself a foundation to do A/B testing, to start building that feedback loop, to identify those groups and find people that are similar and start testing your messages against similar profiles of people to see how it works. If you see that we're talking to very similar types of folks and the message is, 50-50 on whether folks are responding to it, that probably means that either your message is off or your target's off.
Yeah. So here's another good one. Comes from D. Wilson. For me as a voter, I'm over the back and forth with candidates. I want to know what are you going to do different so the entire community feels action. So is it important to talk about the other person who's running? And you touched on this a little bit, Derek, because it is important to be able to offer contrast. But there is a way to do that without slinging mud or outright attacking your opponent. Can you talk about walking that delicate balance and how much to talk about your opponent versus to just focus on your road?
Yeah, I'm a positive campaigner, guys. It is in my heart of hearts that all campaigns should be positive. I think it is fine if your opponent is an elected official you to point at any single vote they've ever made on the record. Period. 1,000%. That is not negative campaigning to say this person voted for this and here was the outcome. Would you guys think about that? Right. That's, I think, absolutely 100% fair game. I think it gets when you're in a situation where maybe you are running for an open seat and you are both challengers, talking about your opponent is not something that you should be doing a lot of, right? I think you can beg contrast without ever saying your opponent's name. Your opponent should not be getting free airtime because you're mentioning it. They shouldn't be getting free advertisement because you're saying their name. I think if you say something like, I'm the only candidate in the race who believes XYZ, it sort of begs the question, well, who is the other person and why don't they believe that? Right. And so you can draw those contrasts. I'm the only person. Like it moves into sometimes some sort of like black and white territory that I understand some folks are uncomfortable with. But at the end of the day, like I don't talk about my opponents unless they call me out by name, and even then, it's gonna take a pretty easily dismissed or heinous remark to get me to come out of hiding for that. But at the end of the day, you should be talking about your vision, your values. If your opponent is on the other side of that spectrum from you, I think it's fine to say that without mentioning them. But I'd rather beg the contrast, sort of beg the question than ever mention my opponent directly. Couldn't dream of it. So,
Yeah. So next question here comes from Peterson. What about the question that was asked about breaking through the lockdown of good old boys networks within communities? So advice for being able to break through those types of communities and messages that do well with being able to get through those types of communities.
yeah, it is. There's a few messages that I tend to go to when I am working with candidates who are running against that sort of good old boy network, right? If you work with me directly, you're going to hear the phrase "new generation of leadership," right? The new generation of leadership. It's time for Paris to have a new generation of leadership. I even think there's are ways to draw a contrast. Thanking somebody for their very long tenure in public service and how it's time for a new generation of leadership. But I think a lot of it is pointing to the things that you wish were better in your community and tying that lack of progress back to the status quo. I don't think you have to talk about the good old boy network. I don't think you have to name it as such. I think you can just call it the status quo. Business as usual. Business as usual has not gotten us X, Y, and Z, right? And so that's how I think you sort of tie that network, generally speaking, to like the overarching problems, especially if it is a status quo that has been in place for a very long time. I think you have a very credible and persuasive argument to make with those folks who are willing to hear it, that it's not working and it is time for something new. So that's where my mind goes. New generation of leadership. Look how long they've been in place, and things haven't moved the way we want. What could happen if we had new people in place, right? It's always going to be values, vision, outcomes.
Yeah, I think this really piggybacks well into the question that Karen McLaughlin asked next, which is, can you talk more about values and how you define them? Is going to stand up to a value, or how do I make that idea of a trait of value? And there's some words that like just stand out to me in this question, and I'm gonna try to tie this back to that good old boy question a little bit. I actually love to use sort of a formula of value, trait, and then position when I'm doing campaign messaging. And in the case of like wanting to push back against Good Old Boys Network, the value that I care about is fairness. And so, what's the trait that fairness would drive in me, right? Is sort of the next piece of this. So I care about fairness. So I believe that everyone should be able to run for public office, right? And then what's the position that forces you to take? So I because of that, am, looking to bring more new voices to public office, right? So it's value, trait, and then position. Another version of this or framing of this would be, a common value is accountability, right? So what's a trait that would run off of accountability? I value accountability, so I'm not afraid to ask tough questions. And that's why I support independent audits of city spending. And here comes the contrast bit, instead of reckless spending with no accountability, right? So there's a way to kind of build a really simple reinforcement, because the value only matters if you actually put it into action at the end of the day. So you need to explain to people, I value this and here's what I'm going to do with it. Because if you don't do that piece, it just sounds like noise at the end of the day. So I know I kind of took some liberties and monologued on that one, Derek. But anything else for you about how you might work to really define and show a value in action?
No, honestly, this is the first time I've heard that value trait position framing, Rob, and I actually really like that, because that is how it should flow, right? You guys, if you literally you just Google list of values, right? You can find a list of 200 value words, right? And you can do this exercise yourself and connecting this value to a trait to a policy position that you would have. I think that's a wonderful exercise. Um, yeah, this is great, Rob. And Karen, it's also good to see you again here in the chat. Another returner here for the Good Party Crew.
Um, I think we made it through the backlog of questions so far. Oh, here's one more here. Do you think that robocalls offered by goodparty.org would help to recruit volunteers? Like, would the robocalls be successful in driving people to my volunteer page? We need more tips on getting volunteers and signatures. We are so far away from campaigning for actual office. So this is coming from Stacy, who is in the process of getting petition signatures to get on the ballot. And Derek, will you answer that question about using robocalls to recruit volunteers and some of what you think are good volunteer recruitment ideas? I'm going to go ahead and pull up a link, Stacy, to some additional resources that we have on petition drives.
Yeah. So, do I think robocalls help us recruit volunteers? The short answer is they can, but again, it's very audience dependent. I wouldn't do a mass robocall to everybody in town asking them to volunteer. Um, not that it could not be effective, but it's probably not the most cost-effective thing you could do. You can probably get about the same amount of reach with a free Facebook post. What I say, if folks ask me, and will give my honest opinion on the effective use cases for robocalls, which is specifically endorsement messages from somebody running in a higher office than you, from somebody running in a higher office than you, or in a higher office. If you're running for city council and the state senator wants to endorse you, great. You're running for state senate and the congressman wants to endorse you, great. You're running for Congress, the president wants to endorse you, great. I think robocalls can be effective, again, with a very targeted, value-based to that elected's like base supporters can be effective, right? They can act as a third party validator and sort of like give you their authority, right? The most effective use case for robocalls is going to be what I like to describe as PSA style, almost apolitical, get out to vote reminders. Hi, this is Derek reminding you the election day is tomorrow. Polls will be open from 7 to 8 p.m. If you have any questions, if you need a ride to the poll, please give us a call at our phone number, paid for and authorized by Derek, whatever my phone number is, right? So those are the specific use cases. I think if you are looking to recruit volunteers, the two best places to look, right? Assuming that this isn't just like folks that are coming across your campaign and sort of self-activating, right? It's going to be your personal network. That's going to be huge, right? These are going to be kitchen cabinet members, especially any personal connections you have to like what I will call grass top leaders, right? The folks who might be in charge of advocacy organizations or community action organizations and stuff like that. And the other big place you're going to find volunteers is from the personal networks of the folks that you're bringing into your campaign, right? This sort of relational volunteer recruitment, which I think is really effective. So it's hard. If you want tips on how to get signatures for your ballot access, I don't have enough time in the rest of the day to give you all my tips for that. That is my nerdy special interest, Stacy, and I could talk to you for far too long about that. But would be happy to chat potentially later on. If you send me a direct message in Circle, I would be happy to dump all of my tips and tricks to get your signatures.
And Stacy, we actually did a training where Derek and I covered a lot of this topic a couple of weeks ago, and I linked to that in the chat as well. So if you want the sort of 90-minute training, kind of like what we did tonight on messaging, but about getting on the ballot, that's linked there as well. And I'll just add a couple other pieces because I know there are a lot of people who are in the same place as you right now, where you're collecting signatures, you're working to qualify for the ballot. I think that if you start by making the first ask that you make of people a small ask, it helps to get people addicted to it, honestly. So can you help collect 10 signatures from friends and coworkers is a really good first ask. And when somebody goes out and does that, then they have to bring those signatures back to you. At that point, ask them, can you do 30 minutes with me at the farmer's market this Saturday? And that can graduate to, can you grab one more clipboard and fill out at your gym or your church, right? So that's a way to take somebody who initially makes a commitment of just 10 signatures and help them to actually collect closer to 50. And Derek mentioned your social circle. That is the best place to start. And I know that can be a little bit scary, but your friends, coworkers, neighborhood groups, parents at school, local clubs, activist groups, community organizations, all of these are really great places to start from. And you can also kind of turn petitioning into an event, right? Like a lot of the times people who are on the fence about doing things will turn out for novelty or they'll turn out for something fun. So if you have a kickoff barbecue, for example, where you invite your volunteers, and that's where you train them on how to do signature collection, and that's where you hand out clipboards and send people out with their petition sheets for the first time with that commitment to just collect 10 from folks. That can be really a helpful way to get out of the gates on signatures. And then, the petition drive training that we put together that I also linked to, we talk a lot about the locations that are best for signatures. And signature drives, are happening at farmers markets, at transit stations, college campuses, grocery store entrances. I really like looking for post offices, going right to the town office, for example, places that registered voters are likely to go and where residents are likely to go. It's almost becoming a meme at this point, but I always joke about going to the dump if you're in a town that has a dump because there's always a line. And that's a really good, transfer stations are a really good place for collecting signatures where you have a captive audience. The real key here and the way that this is different than a lot of other forms of voter contact is you're looking for volume over just specific targets, right? When you get to a point where you're doing the messaging that we talked about in most of this training, you want to take a specific message to a specific set of voters. With the signature drive, you just want to see as many people as possible who are registered voters in the town or the district that you are trying to get on the ballot in. So you're trying to go to crowded areas, where you're going to see multiple people per hour, per minute, and just maximize your opportunities. I know it's a good day of signature drives when I have 2 or 3 clipboards and I'm handing one to somebody when I'm wrapping up getting somebody else signatures. So you want to be in those high volume areas for that.
Yeah, I'll also say, Stacy, it's asking for volunteers is a very specific skill. Make sure you are making a hard ask. Give them a specific thing that you want them to do. And I promise, guys, this is something I've said to many candidates. Most folks who get involved with your campaign, your best supporters you will need to ask them to get involved. If you don't ask them and you don't ask them directly, most people will think you got it. Okay. And if you aren't expressing that to your supporters, and especially those supporters who are in your closest social circle, then you're doing yourself and you're doing them a disservice too, I think, because believe it or not, your friends and family and the people who love you want to see you succeed. They want to see you win this race. But until you make a direct ask, the chance of someone coming out of the woodwork and just saying, "Hey, you've never met me. Can I volunteer for your campaign?" Unless you're running for a particularly high office is fairly slim. So make sure you are making that ask. I see here that you've got your first meetup on Saturday, and that's wonderful. When you're asking folks to come to that, it's, "Hey, can you meet me Saturday, 10 a.m. at the park?" Right? Give them very specific directions and let them know exactly what you need. But if you don't ask, chances are you won't get anything. And so I think it's a skill that the most effective campaigners do very well.
This question from JC is it okay to get a partisan politician to endorse a nonpartisan candidate? Will that help or backfire? Do voters like that?
Depends on the race and the candidate and the elected official, my man. I mean, if you are in let's say a Republican +5 registration district and Barack Obama endorses you, chances are that's not going to make that +5% Republican advantage go away, right? Ideally, especially if you're running for a nonpartisan office or you are running as an independent candidate in a partisan office, I recommend that if you're going to roll out a partisan endorsement, that you're rolling out bipartisan endorsements, right? That you are rolling out a significant Dem with a significant Republican, and try sort of show coalition building. I think anytime you hook your wagon up to the elephant or the donkey, guys, you run the risk of alienating the other 50% of the voters, right? So it can be dicey. I really think it depends on the political dynamic and the political context of your race. But Yeah, unless they are an extremely popular, nearly universally popular politician. I tend to see endorsements from the most relevant body. And so if like you're running for city council and a current city councilor endorses you, that endorsement goes a lot farther than some random popular politician. So in most cases, obviously everything being equal, but I resist it. I resist it unless you absolutely can roll out endorsements from both.
Yeah. I see two more questions here. And the first one I want to put a little bit of a spin on. Lacey had asked, how are people raising money? And I do want to tie this to the messaging theme a little bit because I think when you're asking for money from people, when you're doing fundraising, how you ask matters as much as where you're asking or what ways you're asking for people. I think a key part of bringing smart messaging into this is to tie your why or your values into the ask and make it clear what donating will actually do for the campaign. So asks that are tied to, our campaign needs to raise $500 to be able to qualify for the ballot or to circulate petitions or print petitions to get on the ballot or to feed volunteers who are going door to door. Those are stronger asks than simply saying, I need $500, right? So being able to work that in. But Derek, advice on fundraising generally, but especially messaging to fundraising.
Yeah, I'm going to lean back on sort of what you said here. Like you guys should be connecting dollars to outcomes, right? Like it's easy enough to say, oh, I need to raise $250,000 for this campaign. Our goal and one of our core pillars over here at goodparty.org is that people should matter more than money in politics. And the way we live that out is giving you guys all of these very sophisticated campaign tools that typically cost thousands of dollars, consultant fees in the thousands of dollars for campaigns. And we offer that for as close to free as they will let us give it away. And so I think it's sort of a two-part question of how do I raise the money and how do I set the messaging and also how can I keep costs down so I don't have to do so much of that. But I think like you said, connecting that dollars to outcome, I need to raise $500 for X, Y, and Z thing. I'm also a big fan, and this was imparted upon me when I was 19, and Rob was my boss. But the idea of symbolic asks and connecting these sort of novel milestones to fundraising amounts. So I remember a campaign we worked on where we were talking about 83,000 Mainers for where something was happening to them, these 83,000 Mainers. And so we said, we would love if you could help us out with a very generous contribution of $83 to help the 83,000 Mainers who are struggling with X, Y, and Z. And so I think if you can find these sort of like milestones to like not only give your supporters like a nice number to aim for, but it also like it makes the conversation a little bit less intense and sort of anxiety inducing when you have these sort of like little novel things you're reaching for and you have these reasons for why you're doing these numbers other than I just need money. But I think at the end of the day, fundraising is a skill and is a very specific skill. And thankfully, because it is a skill, you can hone it. And I think my best piece of advice for fundraising, guys, and if you my guys might hate to do this, but you just got to do it. You got to make the ask. You got to make the calls. You got to dig deep inside yourself and push through that anxiety and ask for those dollars. At the end of the day, I promise you, no one's going to give you their last $10 for your campaign. People will say no if they can't do it. You have to learn to accept that rejection, and you also have to learn to live with the fact that some of these people may say yes, and your friends might give you money. Okay, so I think a lot around messaging for fundraising is urgency, urgency, urgency outcome. That's the whole piece of it for me. So.
Yeah, I'll even apply that value trait policy framing to this. I could see going out and saying, I believe that people should matter more than money in our democracy. That's the value, right? That's why I'm building this campaign differently. Instead of trying to raise more money or the most money from a few big donors. I'm actually trying to earn support from the most voters. So if you believe in what we're doing, chip in whatever you can. It could be $5, the literal minimum, or it could be $500, the literal maximum in this campaign. It doesn't matter. What matters is that people stand behind this campaign, and that I can show people that people-powered campaigns can be competitive. So that would be another way of taking all of those values and putting them into action for what I think would make a pretty compelling fundraising ask. Another question here from Karen, she's thinking about volunteer coordinators. And is it wise to delegate volunteer recruitment to another volunteer, especially in the context of a local race?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great idea unless you have like easy access to be able to clone yourself and be in multiple places at once. I think tapping a volunteer to help manage your volunteers is not only exceptionally common in campaigns, I do believe it is a best practice. I mean, obviously, if you can pay a staffer to do nothing but recruit volunteers all day, great. But I think having somebody who you can rely on, because at the end of the day, guys, the most valuable thing you have on your campaign is actually the candidate's time, right? That is like more than anything else. They are the most effective messenger. They're the most powerful messenger. And so having support people around that can take some of that pressure off of the candidate, whether that be a volunteer coordinator or a finance person. I know if you guys are in the planning stages of your campaign, you're probably looking for a treasurer to help deal with some of the filings and stuff like that. You should absolutely find these areas that you need help with and tap somebody to take those on. I think delegation is an exceptionally important piece of a campaign. I mean, unless you're running in a town of 500 people, it's very difficult to run a campaign by yourself. And Karen, I know you've done it before. You've run for office a couple times, but I think absolutely a volunteer coordinator is very important. And also like having volunteer coordinators and volunteer leaders, right? Sort of speaking back to what Rob said about this idea of like an ask ladder. How do you get someone from 10 signatures to come to the farmer's market to go and doing a shift by themselves? Is if you have this sort of like a volunteer coordinator and you can get volunteer leaders, like you can sort of move folks up the ladder. And people will surprise you by how much they want to be involved and help. And I think especially if you are in a place that has got ready access to like a college campus or a university campus, these are really good roles for college kids and for folks who probably aren't working your typical 9 to 5, who can really help with the campaign. So I think it's great. I think everybody should have a volunteer coordinator, and especially if that volunteer coordinator is willing to make the calls themselves and not just show up and run the events, but actually like help with the legwork that it takes to get people to show up to a campaign event.
Awesome. Well, on that note, I think I'm going to wrap us up. I'd love, Derek, if you could just close us out. If there's one thing you'd want every candidate who is listening tonight to walk away with as sort of a takeaway, what would that be?
Yeah, write down your why in 1 or 2 sentences, guys, not your platform, not your policy list, just why you're running and what your community is experiencing right now that push you to step forward to run. If you can do that today and get that done tonight, you guys will have the seed of everything, the foundation of everything you need for the rest of your campaign.
Awesome. On that note, we have a lot of resources in the community that are dedicated to this question of helping you figure out your why. So if you have not had the opportunity to sit down and write that, one thing that I'll pass on to you guys, I'll kind of assign this as homework for anyone who wants to dig into this deeper. Our Why Should I Run module of the run course, that whole run course is worth doing if you haven't already. But if you take the 5 to 15 minutes or so that it takes to do this module, I think that you'll come away with a really strong why statement. So please check that out, and we'll we'll be back in 2 weeks with another training here. I'm really looking forward to being back for that. I hope that you'll all hop on the event calendar and RSVP. The theme for that is going to be fundraising, which I know we began to tap into a little bit on this call. Jared Alper, our political director, is going to come back for that training, and we're going to talk all about how to raise the money that you need to be able to activate your network and take these messages to your folks. So please RSVP for that next webinar. If you got value out of this, I think you're going to get a ton of value out of that. And take a look at that run course, because I find that the people who go through that typically are able to get a little bit of a leg up. And if you have follow-up questions on any of this, know that you can reach out to myself or Derek or any of the goodparty.org folks via message or the Ask the Expert channel in Circle. All right, folks, that's it. Thank you for hanging out with us on a Thursday night. We will talk again